So imagine being able to tell the story of your army or armies with some spoils of war. Hi, and welcome to the video. Us Warhammer collectors often have a lot of spare bits laying around, but we can make a fun tradition with these. You could talk to your friends and opponents beforehand and suggest whoever wins could win a spare bit from the losing side's army. You could add these bits to the bases of your own army if you have the space for it, but if not, you can make a small diorama to show off your wins, like these. Adding the little bits to different dioramas can just add so much history to your armies, and can help you remember some really fun times. Although, I gotta be honest, I'm not the best strategist, so most of my games tend to go like this. Oh, I can't wait for my turn.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Guys. And because of that, I owe my friend quite a few pieces of orcs. So, I wanted to make a small trophy for his wins. I searched online for a few STLs that would work out for making a custody, and bashed them together in Blender. I wanted to have him impaling an orc with the tip of his spear, so after fiddling around with the posing, I finally got it into the position I wanted. Then I just had to wait until he was printed. In the meantime, I started setting up the base for the diorama. I used some insulation foam for the base of the model because I had some laying around after some of the other projects I'd done, and I cut out a small part of it with my foam cutter. Once done, I started shaping it to have a bit more of a rugged terrain look. To make sure it was flat, I sanded it down with some sandpaper. When I got it to the right shape, I glued down some scrap foam I'd cut off before to make a small elevated spot on the top, so it wasn't just a flat top. I used cocktail sticks to hold it in place while I glued it. The glue I used to help get this to stick was wood glue, but you can also use some PVA glue. Unfortunately, you can't use super glue with this foam because it'll just melt right through it. I definitely found that out the hard way. If you've ever struggled with trying to spray paint some foam, one easy way around that is to just put a couple of layers worth of either PVA, wood glue, or some other kind of white glue, and once that's completely set you should be safe to spray it. Next up was to add some texture, and for that I used my trusty wall filler. After giving it a nice layer, it looks like this. But I wanted to add a bit more rubble to it, so for that I decided to use some of my battlefield gravel. Quite easy to do, just put some glue on the areas you want it and sprinkle it on, and wipe away the excess. After that was all set, it was looking pretty good, but it wasn't quite finished yet. I still wanted to add a couple more extra bits onto there. So I went through my bits box and I was trying to find something that would be a bit more fitting, and I ended up finding this cool orc sign, which I thought would look great on the small elevated spot. And then just because there was a bit of extra space, I grabbed one of my 3D printed skulls and then stuffed that on the side. While that was all setting and drying, I went and grabbed the 3D prints and started checking whereabouts I wanted to position it. After pretty quickly finding the right spot I wanted it to be, the next step was to cut up the orc torso a little bit to fit the spear into it. Make sure to be careful when using crafting knives and hand drills because they can easily slip and hurt you. After I got the torso carved out, I put a tiny bit of milliput in to help fit the spear in and make it a bit more snug. I also sanded down the tip of the spear to help it fit a bit better. I had some spare milliput after doing this, so to make sure I didn't waste anything, I made a small sleeve for one of the orc's arms. And once the rain had finally stopped, I started priming. When the priming was done, I was able to start applying my texture paint to the base, and for that I used Martian Iron Crust. I was being quite generous with this because I really wanted it to cover everything, add a bit more texture and colour. I also wanted it to be drying while I started painting the rest of the models. With the texture paint all over it, it was time to switch over to the custodian, the orc. It was a new experience painting one of these golden banana boys, but it was definitely fun. And after quite a long time painting, I finally had all of the pieces done. After getting all of these parts done, I was able to switch back to doing the base, and what it needed was a nice dry brush. To create a bit more depth, I decided to use a light brushing of Xandri dust. It's a great combo with this texture paint, and it's the same I've been using to base all of my orcs so far. I tested once again to be sure where I wanted to position it, and after making sure he fits still, I then started finishing off by posing the orc and gluing him together. It also ended up being pretty quick. Before gluing the orc to the spear's tip, I planned on adding some shocks to the orc coming from the spear, because I thought it would look cool, and I think it does. I started by trying to match up the contact points where the lightning was on the spear with the body, and then used some white paints to create a small base for it. I used some light blue on top of that to give it a nice shocking look. Once that was done, it was time to glue him to the spear and pin down the model to the base. To make sure it was a strong connection, I used quite a lot of wire and made sure it went quite deep into the base, and thankfully it didn't end up top heavy. And here's the final result. I also added a little tuft at the front to make it look a bit nicer. I'm sure my friend who has won many times against my orcs will be happy to have a trophy to show off his wins. I also hope it gave you some inspiration to try out some of your own diorama projects, and maybe even make a trophy collection too. I'd love to see how creative everyone could get with their trophies for their armies, so if you do decide to make some, tag me on Instagram or leave a comment below on how it went. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content to come, and I'll see you in the next one.